Joal for short. Our next speaker is another of these gentlemen who was very quietly in the background when President Ramos and General Monte were doing their reform effort, their reform thing. I met him before he became our esteemed Chief Justice. He was actually also a reformist in his own way. My favorite Supreme Court decision, something that he was the ponente of, Anyada versus Angara. It was into international trade, but it defined our position in international trade from the Supreme Court's point of view, which trumps everyone else. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for joining us today and giving remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, former Chief Justice PANGANIBAN.
Thank you, Tony, for that little piece that we were together in support of President Ramos in our meetings. Well, President Ramos, I shouldn't let this pass without saying how he plucked me from anonymity and brought me to the Supreme Court. One Friday, in June 1992, my phone in my car, at that time the cell phones were huge, with huge batteries and they're connected to the car batteries, rang and I said, hello. And he said, this is Attorney PANGANIBAN? Yes, who's this? He said, this is Eddie. Eddie who? He said, Eddie Ramos, Mr. President, because at the time that he called, June 1992, he has not yet taken his oath as president, but he was already president-elect. Can we meet tomorrow at room 205, 843 Pasay Road? Following day, I came in, and who opened the door? General Almonte, the fearsome General Almonte. And he ushered me into the conference room where President Ramos was seated alone. He talked with me for about an hour and finally said, well, Art, I asked you to come because I'd like to invite you to my cabinet as Secretary of Justice. I was taken aback. I said, Mr. President, thank you very much, but I am not qualified for that. Why? He said, well, because I did not campaign for you. I was not in your campaign team. I said, I know that. You didn't even vote for me. You voted for your mentor, Joby Salonga. It's true, because Joby Salonga was my dean and was my first boss in the law office. But he said, never mind. I don't want to be president of only the Filipinos who voted me. I want to be president of all the Filipinos. I said, Mr. President, I have another problem. What is it? My wife. Who, by the way, is here. He said, what's your problem with your wife? Well, I said, she doesn't want politics. Well, he said, I'll write down your name as my Secretary of Justice. See me again in 2 weeks. Talk with your wife. After 2 weeks, he called me again and said, oh, ano? Mr. President, ayaw pa rin ho eh. Sumusunod ka naman sa kanya. Ay, opo. Under Visaya ka pala. Opo. Pareho na tayo. And then he said, but you must work in this government. You just, sa Supreme Court ka na lang. That's what he said. Exactly. Oh, I was so surprised. And I said, Mr. President, huwag niyo pong nilalang yan. Wala pong politika dyan. Magugustuhan ko yan. Magugustuhan din ang asawa ko. That's how I got into the Supreme Court. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, General Almonte, who ushered me. He's my guru in Philippines 2000. It should be updated. Philippines 2025. PM Berata, Governor Jokno, my other speakers. Oh, you have Congresswoman Kimbo. Congress lady should be. Esteemed authors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is said that there are as many opinions as there are lawyers in the room. This one-liner may have inspired William Shakespeare to propose, and I quote him, "The first thing we do is to kill all lawyers," unquote. I shouldn't be standing here. Somebody might shoot me. It's good that Almonte was just accused of treason, but now I'm going to be shot. Well, the great English bard may have meant a context different from my opening sentence. But whatever be the context, I was also told that the same story of having as many opinions in the room is also applicable to economists. Fortunately or unfortunately, Shakespeare referred only to lawyers, not to economists, as being shot. No? Let me aside, may I say that despite the allegedly disparate opinions of economists in general, once in a long while, a group of truly brilliant ones have gathered and put together their writings in one noteworthy book, already mentioned, Momentum, with a distinctive cover in blue, not maroon, not green either. Does that say something? A book that can be understood even by nincompoop lawyers like me. And if ever there would be a Supreme Court for economic matters, I think the authors of this book, Romeo Bernardo, Chief Chikiamco, Emmanuel de Dios, Raul Fabella, and the late Cayetano Paderanga, would easily constitute some of the most revered members. And this book would contain their landmark ponencias or decisions to be read, reread, and obeyed by lawyers like me, as well as by economists, I hope, and more importantly, by the policymakers of our country. For they contain gems that are immortal, have been tested by time, then and now, by countries big and small, and by ideologies left and right. Like the revered writers of this book, I have humbly espoused over my years as a lawyer, jurist, and citizen, my philosophy, my own philosophy of liberty and prosperity under the rule of law, which I humbly say is in legal equilibrium with theirs, except that mine sees the subject from a lawyer's lenses, while theirs strike deep into the heart of the economy. In the books I have written and several speeches I have delivered, I have many times echoed the same theme, the same truth as the authors, maybe in slightly different words, but I think with the same passion and addiction. And you can blame General Almonte for that addiction. And that theme is this: humans need justice and jobs, freedom and food, ethics and economics, and according to President Ramos, peace and development. Liberty and prosperity, these are twin beacons that must always go together. One is useless without the other. For what good is freedom of speech when the stomach is empty and the body is mortally sick? Moreover, the theme inevitably evolves into a truth that transcends sovereignty, territories, ideologies, and legalities. And that truth is this: the best way to conquer poverty, to create wealth, and to share prosperity is to unleash the entrepreneurial genius of our people by granting them the freedom and the tools to help themselves and society. During my over 11 years in the Supreme Court, and though not an economist, I tried to echo this truth in my decisions and opinions. Well, let me cite one example that Tony mentioned. Cañada versus Angara, which I decided when I was very new in the court, in which the court affirmed, reluctantly in the beginning, but unanimously in the end, our country's membership in the World Trade Organization, which was one of the beacons of President Ramos, and its adoption of the axioms of globalization, liberalization, deregulation, and privatization as the keys to economic growth. In that decision, I wrote in part, maybe not the favorite part of Tony, but there I said, all told, while the Constitution indeed mandates a bias in favor of Filipino goods, services, labor, and enterprises, at the same time it recognizes the need for business exchange with the rest of the world on the basis of equality and reciprocity, and limits the protection of Filipino enterprises only against foreign competition and trade practices that are unfair. In other words, the Constitution did not intend to pursue an isolationist policy. It did not shut out foreign investments, goods and services in the development of the Philippine economy. While the Constitution does not encourage the unlimited entry of foreign goods, services, and investments into the country, it does not prohibit them either. In fact, it allows an exchange on the basis of equality and reciprocity, frowning only on foreign competition that is unfair. Close quotation. Ladies and gentlemen, at the time that that decision was issued, more than 2 decades ago, the reigning economic doctrine was Filipino first. Thus, I have difficulty convincing my colleagues of the necessity to abandon isolationist policies and to embrace the new 21st century economic doctrines. In the beginning, only 3 members of the court concurred with me, and the rest either dissented or concurred only in the result, meaning that they agreed with my conclusions but not necessarily with the reasons therefore. I considered it an insult, agreeing with me in the result but not with the reasons. So I had to convince them further, and after days of patient explanations, discussions, and deliberations, I finally convinced all the other 14 justices to agree, thereby making the decision unanimous. When I became Chief Justice, I pursued with greater vigor my philosophy of liberty and prosperity, to the point of getting our Supreme Court to sponsor the holding of a global forum on liberty and prosperity. With funding grants from the World Bank, the USAID, the Canadian International Development Agency, the European Union, the Asia Foundation, and others. About 300 jurists, academics, lawyers from around the world attended, including the top jurists of several countries, including Russia, China, Canada. In fact, the first female Chief Justice of Canada, Beverly McLaughlin, came, but he has retired recently at age 75, that's their retirement age in Canada, proposed in her major address, and I accepted, that the philosophy be renamed Liberty and Prosperity under the Rule of Law, to stress that the egalitarian goal should be achieved only via libertarian methods. Equally significant, the forum adopted the Manila Declaration, accepting and lauding the philosophy and calling for a reconvening of the forum every 3 years. Unfortunately, after I retired, the court returned to the tradition of giving primacy to liberty and shielding prosperity no longer as an equal, but only as a secondary objective. The traditional primacy granted to political liberties, like the presumption of innocence unless proven guilty, the freedom of speech and expression and of peaceful assembly is understandable, given that the Constitution makes the Bill of Rights mandatory and self-executing without need of implementing legislations. On the other hand, it listed the roads to prosperity, like the right to education, to healthy environment, to be freed from poverty, were mostly in the 3 articles titled Declaration of Principles and State Policies, Social Justice and Human Rights, and Education, Science and Technology, Arts, Culture, and Sports. These provisions are generally viewed as mere ideals and aspirations, which, unlike the Bill of Rights, are not mandatory and self-executing. They need implementing laws to be judicially enforced. Why is this so? Why is there a dichotomy in approaching the rights to liberty on the one hand and the rights to prosperity on the other? This is because our Constitution was born out of our centuries-old struggle for political freedom and for independence from foreign domination, from Spain for 400 years, then from America. Notably, we borrowed our Bill of Rights from the Constitution of the United States, which itself was born from the American battle for independence from colonial rule, epitomized by Patrick Henry's epic cry of, "Give me liberty or give me death." While political rights must still be safeguarded, I firmly believe in and fervently espouse the nurturing of prosperity in equal measure. Hence, though already retired from the Supreme Court, as a private citizen, I organized the Foundation for Liberty and Prosperity, or FLP, to celebrate my 75th birthday in 2011. To begin with the help of Metrobank Foundation, we created 20 professorial chairs on liberty and prosperity, which were conferred on deans of leading law schools so that they might shift their thinking from mere liberty, political liberty, to economic freedom. And at the same time, the foundation created 20 scholarships also at 200,000 each for outstanding law students, that they may also study how the axioms of prosperity can be further enhanced in the academy. Our first scholars, by the way, 10 of them, the first scholars, 2 topped the bar. One was number 1, and the other one was number 5. Not bad for a start. No? It shows that even while students are studying non-bar exam subjects, they can still excel in their bar subjects. That means that education can be changed, even if the Supreme Court does not change its direction. Of course, we want Supreme Court to change its direction so that there will be equal attention to political liberty and economic freedom. The FLP is now actively planning to establish a roving museum on liberty and prosperity in 2020, and with the cooperation of the Supreme Court and other sponsors to reconvene the Global Forum on Liberty and Prosperity in 2021. I think the book we're launching today, whether intentionally or unintentionally, immensely contributes to this valiant effort to equalize the war against poverty with the struggle for liberty. I believe the pivotal battle in the years ahead will be on how to enlarge the economy, to push for prosperity, for education, for health, and to banish, or at least minimize, poverty, disease, and disability from the Philippines and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I fervently ask you to join me in congratulating the authors and their editor, Roel Landingin, for this interesting and readable tome that simplifies and demystifies the labyrinths of economics to make them understandable by mere lawyers like me. Thank you very much.
Liberty and prosperity. Our Chief Justice with the heart of an economist. Thank you very much, Chief Justice ARTEMIO V. Well, last but not the least,